Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 election in the state of Virginia. Virginia is a state that we haven't discussed a lot in depth, but yesterday Fox News released a poll that showed Donald Trump and Joe Biden tied in this state. 48% for Biden, 48% for Trump, and yet another very bad poll for Joe Biden. So let's talk a little about it today. Let's talk about Virginia. Let's talk about whether it's actually, first of all, what this poll means, if you should believe it, and most importantly, what will happen in Virginia come November. Is Virginia actually competitive? So we're just going to start by looking at this poll. And again, tied race per the poll. You'll see that Joe Biden loses ground with almost everyone, but the largest shift towards Trump away from Biden is with black voters. In 2020, Biden won black voters in Virginia by 81 points, and this poll, he's only up by 48. So he's doing 33% worse with black voters than he did last time. That's not a winning recipe. And then you will also see that if you look at how voters perceive the candidates on the issues, it's not good for Biden either. So he's leading on climate change. Not a surprise. Democrats have consistently led on climate change, even in races they lose. Abortion, not a surprise. Biden's up, but it's an important issue. It likely will be an important issue in this campaign. So a good sign there. Election integrity, he's up by a similar amount. That's fine. Healthcare, only up by 8%. I would usually expect Democrats to be up by a lot more. Historically, not historically, but in the past few election cycles, Democrats like to be ahead by 15 to 20 points on the healthcare issue. And Virginia is a blue state. This isn't a state that's reflective of the national environment. This is a blue state. So you would expect Biden to be up by more than that even. But healthcare, he's only up by 8. That's a bit of a red flag to me. The Israel-Hamas war being a bad spot for Biden to me isn't a surprise. I think I've kind of said from the beginning that no matter how Biden responded to this war, it would be bad. If he, continued to give weapons to the Israeli government, if he, took the pro-Israel stance that a lot of people assume he's taking, that would really hurt him, especially among young voters who polls show are less sympathetic to Israel than the older generations. But if he took a stance that was more in line with a ceasefire or with the Palestinian cause, or not necessarily with Hamas, but against continued fighting in the region and against the continuation of supplying the Israeli military with weaponry, and that to me would be better taken with young voters, but definitely not with everyone else. That would also, to me, be a losing strategy, especially because Democrats rely a lot on Jewish voters. And Jewish voters, in the polls we've seen, do tend to support a more active role in supporting the Israeli government, based on the limited polls we have. Now, often these polls don't have great sample sizes. I wish we had better polls, but we have seen limited evidence that Jewish voters do have some level of support for Israel that they would like Biden to reflect in his policies. And so no matter how Biden responded to this would be a lose-lose. And Democrats have this harder than Republicans because Democrats, obviously there is a left-wing part of the Democratic Party that really, really doesn't like Biden's response to the Israel-Hamas war. They don't want Biden to be supplying the Israeli government with the weaponry he's giving them. They want there to be a more active push for a ceasefire in the region. And then there's also a flank of the Democratic Party that's very pro-Israel. Again, Jewish voters are overwhelmingly Democratic. There are a lot of Democratic lawmakers who are Jewish who have expressed support for Israel. So this, to me, is an issue that I'm not surprised Biden's losing on. This is the one area where I will say he can't do a lot, right? Like on the economy, on immigration, on healthcare, Biden can improve to me. On the Israel-Hamas war, the only thing I think he can realistically hope for is to get voters to distrust Donald Trump. But there will never, to me, be a point in time where Joe Biden is seen as a candidate who handled this conflict well, because this country is too polarized. There's too many sides. It's such a complex issue that there's nothing Biden can do that will make him more popular. If he gains, if he does something and more people, and he gains with one, set of people, he will lose with another set of people. That's why this really hurts him. But Israel-Hamas, to me, this is not as worrisome as the other ones. Now, the economy, Biden 42% there, kind of what you'd expect. Republicans do tend to actually do better on the economy, even in, even in times where we have a Republican government and the economy is not good, or even in times we have a Democratic government, the economy is good. Arguably, you could say now the economy is good. By most objective measures, the economy is doing well. It's a lot better than it was 2 years ago. And Biden has recovered a little bit. He was in the 30s for the better part of 2021 and 2022 and parts of 2023. But he's recovered a little bit on the economy, so you got to give him credit for that. But in this poll in Virginia, a blue state, still down by 12, not what you want to see. And then here's the big problem, immigration. This, to me, should not be happening. This is a very bad sign for Joe Biden. Virginia is socially liberal. You have a lot of educated, wealthy voters who you'd expect to be a lot more relaxed on the immigration, dynamic, right? If you're a wealthy, socially liberal voter who lives in the suburbs of D.C. and voted for Biden, voted for Hillary Clinton, there should be no reason you are trusting Donald Trump more to handle immigration than Joe Biden. Now, why is this happening? Why is Biden down 17% on this issue in a state he won by 10 points last time? It's simple. Republicans have dominated the immigration conversation in this country for a while, but it's become especially bad over the course of the past 2 to 3 years. Democrats have really struggled to address this. I think that one of the biggest failures of the Biden communications team, and I don't mean this from a policy perspective. As you all know, I do not give policy takes on this channel. This is solely an electoral analysis channel. But you will know that from a policy perspective, or what I will say right now, from an electoral perspective, not policy, from an electoral perspective, one of the biggest failures of the Biden administration has been their lack of a response to Republican attacks on immigration. And that's why in a state like Virginia, you have Biden down 17% on this issue, because the perception that is widely popular throughout this country and as well in Virginia is that Joe Biden doesn't have a plan to tackle immigration, that there is, a stream of immigrants coming into this country, and that Democrats don't know what to do about it. So immigration, to me, the economy, and healthcare, those are the three issues where Biden's losing the most. I think the climate change is fine. Abortion for him is fine. Even I'd say Israel-Hamas war, that number to me, not great, but there's not a lot that he can change about it that I think you can come up with right now. But those three issues, the economy, immigration, and healthcare, Biden needs to do better on. So we've now looked at this poll. We now know what the people or what the electorate in this poll thinks about Joe Biden and how he's handling these issues compared to Trump. But let's talk about Trump for a second. The majority of Virginians actually did believe that Donald Trump got a fair trial. So 55% of them said that he got a fair trial. 42% said not fair. And the majority still said that it won't really matter. 51% of voters said it will not at all matter in their vote for the presidency. And then we had, good chunk of people saying that will matter. And then we have kind of some people in the middle here. But this is, to me, bad for Biden, right? Like, we have an electorate where the majority think that Trump got a fair trial and thus believe that he's legitimately guilty, right? Like, these people do think Donald Trump committed a crime. And half of them say it doesn't matter to their vote. And he's tied with Biden. 48% of people say they're going to vote for Trump, even though the majority of them do believe Trump committed a crime. That's a problem for Biden. This is what he wanted. Joe Biden wanted an electorate, and not only in Virginia, but across the country. But Joe Biden wants an electorate where the majority of people think Donald Trump did something wrong and that he committed a crime and that his trial was fair, that he is a legitimately convicted criminal. And again, when you think about that, it's hard to win if you're a convicted criminal. Here's the problem for Biden, and this is where it gets interesting for Trump. Biden is still losing in those polls. If you look at the Georgia poll from Quinnipiac that showed Biden down by 5, came out 2 days ago, 60% of voters, I believe, said that they thought, 60% of voters thought that Trump acted unethically. 60% of Georgia voters, so not even 50%, 60% said they believe Trump acted unethically in his role after the 2020 election, and then 51%, or 50%, half the voters in Georgia, said that Trump got a fair trial and he was legitimately guilty. So in multiple states, Georgia and Virginia, we see electorates that say Donald Trump is legitimately guilty, that he got a fair trial, that he's actually guilty. And in Georgia, Trump's up by 5, and in Virginia, he's tied. So that's a problem for Joe Biden, because if he's getting these electorates where people do actually think this, and he's still losing, there's not much he can do. There is not anything you can do if he's legitimately losing, even in these electorates. And so that, to me, is the number one reason why I think that if Trump were to win the election, that would be it. Because Joe Biden still cannot win, even after a Trump conviction. So that's the election as a whole. But let's talk about Virginia for a second, right? So this poll if you believe Virginia's a toss-up. Now, here's why I don't believe it. And it's mainly because of that black number. So in 2020, Biden won black voters in Virginia by 81%, and the poll has him winning them by 48%. So do I think that there's going to be a shift towards Trump with black voters? Definitely. Very possible. Biden could most certainly win black voters in Virginia by less than 81%. It's not going to be close to 48%. And I'm saying this because we have, historically, we've seen that Democrats get underestimated with black voters. This happened in 2012. It happened in 2016. It happened in 2018 midterms. Didn't really happen in 2020, but it came back in 2022. And it's that, especially in the Deep South, especially in important states like Georgia, North Carolina, even Florida to an extent, although Florida is not really competitive anymore. But the best example of this is Georgia. We saw in most polls, Raphael Warnock was doing worse with black voters than he had in 2021. And in the end, he did fine with black voters. He won them by, I think, 1 or 2% less than last time, and he won the election by 3% in the runoff. So we consistently see Democrats get underestimated with black voters. This is a common trend. Polls give Republicans more support among black voters than they actually get on election day. And so Trump's tied in this poll, and he's losing black voters by 48%. I think he'll lose by 70 to 75%, maybe even 80%. And that alone is enough to give Biden the victory in Virginia. But we also, saw that this sample was a bit more Republican leaning, and polls are doing this because in 2020 the polls were wrong. In 2020 the polls had Trump losing in a landslide, and that didn't happen. And even though Trump lost the election, there was still a lot of anger at the polls for how wrong they were. And so what they're doing now is they're creating more Republican leaning samples because, again, if in 2016 and 2020 they missed twice, and they underestimated Donald Trump, they're going to overcompensate. This happens everywhere. In 2017, and this is a good example to give, in 2017, the polls underestimated UK Labour. And UK Labour, in that election, they came very close. It was a snap election called by Theresa May, the Conservative leader. And Labour came very close to winning that election outright. They lost it. It was close. And the polls had them losing by a lot, and they ended up only losing by a little bit. So the polls corrected. In 2019, what did we get? The opposite result. In 2019, the polls overestimated Labour by a good amount, and the Conservatives won by even more than people thought they were going to win by. And the same thing happens in Australia. Same thing happens in Canada. The polls overcorrect. And in America in 2016 and 2020, didn't really happen. But in 2024, based on the polls we're getting, it looks like an overcorrection. So what does that mean? Polls are creating more Republican samples. They don't want to underestimate Trump again, so they're going to survey people who are, more Republican leaning than the state as a whole. So this sample of Virginia was likely more conservative than the actual, state of Virginia is. And they also underestimated Democrats as black voters. I'm very certain of that. So to me, that poll doesn't prove anything. If Trump wins Virginia in November, I'll have egg on my face. That's fine. I'm okay standing, dying on this hill that Biden will still win Virginia. I think he's going to win it by high single digits. I think if he's lucky, he'll win it by more than 2020. But if I had to guess, I'll be conservative. I'll say he wins it by 7 or 8%. So that's what I think about Virginia. And that's my broad take on this poll. Now, the one thing I want to leave you with is that Joe Biden is in a lot of trouble right now. Nationally, I don't think he'd win if the election were held tomorrow. And if nothing changes between now and November, he will likely lose. Now, 6 months to go, first of all, or really 5 months actually to go, first of all. The second thing is that because the polls are overcorrecting, a lot of the stuff we're getting out of these national polls isn't ideal. And so we don't know really where we're at. This election to me is a very hard one to predict. And I felt good about 2020. I felt good about 2022. Right now, I don't have any confident takes about who's going to win. I think I can see the path for Biden. I can also see the case for Trump. I'll talk about more of that later. But the polls don't make any sense because the results that they are yielding are very, very, very swingy from the last election, even 2022, which is not long ago. So that's my take on Virginia. I still think Biden's going to win it. Always watch the polls. Always look at these crosstabs because they are important. I know a lot of people don't like to look at the crosstabs, but they are important and they are very interesting. So let me know what you want to see next. And as always, I'll see you all in the next video.